What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and this week I am driving a 2023 Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus. Up front is a 2.5-liter turbocharged inline-4, and down below is a 6-speed automatic transmission. Now, I am super excited to be filming this video here today because over the last week, I have really, truly enjoyed my experience here in the CX-50 Turbo. I have plenty of things to talk about, tons of things I like, very few things I dislike, so I'm excited to share all of that with you today. But before we get on to anything else, I have a website, zackpradel.com, where you can buy stickers and other merchandise when it becomes available. You could also submit your own vehicle to be reviewed by me through a quick and easy submission form, and you'd get a video of your car just like this one. And you could read my behind-the-scenes blog to see what I'm filming before it comes out on the channel. But let's get back to that 2.5-liter turbo under the hood. Well, it is one of two engines offered here in the CX-50 for 2023. Of course, the 2.5-liter turbo, as well as just a naturally aspirated 2.5-liter. This turbo engine makes 256 horsepower, which is really, really great. You do feel that power when you do rev the vehicle out, and I really, really love that. The naturally aspirated 2.5-liter makes 187 horsepower. It is a little bit slower down low than an equivalent V6 or V8 SUV, but once you put your foot into it, if you want to pass someone, if you're on the highway, whatever you want to do, you definitely have enough power and it feels very, very adequate. That doesn't leave me hanging, and I'm very happy to hear that. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 6-speed automatic. Mazda transmissions are pretty decent. However, I'm just happy at the fact that it's not a CVT. The Subaru Forester, of which I would compare this vehicle to, uses a CVT, and I strongly dislike that. So the fact that this is not a CVT is a big enough win for me. Last but not least, this is the all-wheel drive CX-50. However, there is only the all-wheel drive CX-50. There are no front-wheel drive versions. So how does it feel to actually drive the CX-50? Well, I really, really love it because it feels like the rest of Mazda's lineup. It feels like a slightly bigger Mazda 3. It feels like a touch bigger CX-5. Visibility has been good, throttle response is good, steering feels good, and I really, really enjoy it. Going with the drivetrain, let's talk about some real-world fuel economy. And this is where it ain't so good. Throughout most of my time here with the CX-50, I actually averaged about 22 miles to the gallon, and I've done just over 220 miles in it. However, as you're seeing on camera now, it's sitting just above 20 miles to the gallon. That's because when I film these cars, I let them idle for a while because I have the headlights on, I have the heaters on while I'm filming it, so it brings that average down. But what I can tell you is throughout most of my experience, I did see about 20. I think I might have touched 23 at a point, but it went right back down to 22, 21, that sort of area. And I will say, I've been using the turbo because, well, it's fun. So if you have a lighter foot than mine, I'm sure you can get better fuel economy. And of course, all of the idling that I've been doing for the video does hurt that fuel economy a little bit as well. However, because it is the turbo, it doesn't have stellar numbers, and if you want to really push fuel economy, you're going to want to opt for that naturally aspirated engine. But with that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 3 gauges. Off to the left is my tachometer, off to the right is my coolant temperature and fuel, and in the center, I get a digital screen. So I can customize this a little bit, look at my trip, look at my adaptive cruise control, that sort of thing. But I really like this screen setup. I think it looks good. I think it's clean and simple. It's uncluttered, and that's what I look for in modern gauges. Up above the gauge cluster, I do have a head-up display. This is showing me my current speed as well as the speed limit of the road that I'm on, and it does have sign recognition. So if I'm approaching a stop sign, it will show that. On the steering wheel on the left, I have my volume, skip track, phone options, and info. That info button is going to change that digital gauge screen. And off to the right, I have my adaptive cruise control options. So this does have radar cruise, which in my own personal life, I've used Mazda's radar cruise system probably about 20 to 30,000 miles. And I've never really had a major issue with it, and that carries over to the CX-50. I also do have paddle shifters around the back of the steering wheel, and the steering wheel itself is nice. It is a heated steering wheel, and I like how thin it is. This is pretty parts bin Mazda across all their vehicles. They use pretty much the same steering wheel besides the Miata, and I have to say that's a good thing. I really, really enjoy it. Off to the left, I do have a climate control vent, and then I get a bunch of buttons down below. First of all, we have this bubble button off to the left. That's going to turn the safety features off. Then I have a view button, so this will actually toggle on a 360 camera as well as a front-facing camera, which is really, really nice because this does sit up higher than a more traditional car, and so sometimes you can't perfectly see over the front nose. Well, that's no longer an issue because of this camera. Then I have my parking sensors, traction control off, things like that. But then I have the iStop on and off. So the Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus does have automatic start-stop, where in a situation in which the car would be idling for a while, it actually shuts it off to conserve fuel and cut down on emissions. Every other car with this feature by every other automaker, no matter when you stop, it shuts the car off. I drove a Ford Bronco for a couple of days recently, and anytime I even thought about coming to a stop, the engine was shutting off. That's not the case with the Mazda. I've only noticed it shut off twice, and both times we're in fast food drive-thrus. So not only is it a pretty quiet shut off and turn back on, but it doesn't do it all the time. It only does it when it feels it's absolutely necessary or really going to make an impact on emissions. It doesn't do it all the time, and I love that. That is my favorite auto start-stop feature in any car. And I like the fact that you can turn that off if you don't want it, but honestly, I didn't find it that intrusive. Below that row of buttons, we have another row of buttons, which are the memory seats, as well as the tailgate button. Moving out of the door, I do have a Bose speaker up high, as well as my lock and unlock, power mirrors, and power windows. I also do get this nice stitching going across the door card. I like that little touch. Moving into the center, I do have a pretty large infotainment screen. Now, I do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and I do have adjustments for the Bose system if I really want to get into the nitty-gritty. But what I like is that when the vehicle is in park, Apple CarPlay actually turns into a touchscreen. The rest of the Mazda infotainment system doesn't. But Apple CarPlay is actually a touchscreen when the vehicle's in park. I really, really like that. I think it's the best of both worlds where you could still have a touchscreen if you want it, but during driving, you don't need it. And I like that Mazda offers that. Then we have a lone climate control vent kind of sitting out in the middle of nowhere on the dash. And I honestly didn't notice this until filming this video at the end of my loan. It's a little, peculiar looking. But we do have the climate controls down below here. They are clean and concise. Mazda does this in all of their vehicles. Of course, I have my options for heated and ventilated seats, as well as the heated steering wheel, hazard switch, and of course, dual zone, which I love. Then we have a little cubby up front, and this also has a 12-volt outlet up above. And then we have the cup holders. So we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the 2023 Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus. And unfortunately, it fails. Not only are the cup holders a little too skinny, but the climate controls come out a little too far. So if I try to stand the bottle straight up, it won't fit. So unfortunately, the CX-50 fails the big friggin' bottle test. Then we come down to the center console with the shifter. So off to the left, I actually have my drive mode select. The reason this is interesting is because in a lot of other Mazdas, it's just a sport mode button, sport mode on or off. This actually gives you 3 drive modes: normal, sport, and off-road. The CX-50 is a more adventurous-oriented car, and so that's reflected by the added off-road mode. Then we have the shifter, same exact shifter you'll find in pretty much any modern Mazda product, which is not a bad thing. I think it looks presentable, and it works. And then we have a bunch of selectors down below. So off to the left is my power parking brake and brake hold. Then I have my selector dial for the center infotainment screen. I love the tactile feedback that you get with this. It has nice clicks as you turn it. And the same thing goes for the volume knob. I love the placement of the volume knob. Very ergonomic, makes sense. This is where I naturally rest my hand. So I find myself skipping track and changing the volume with my right hand more often than the steering wheel. However, I will now pause the video because you gotta hear these clicks. Then we have a wireless charger as well as a clamshell opening center console. This is where you'll find a USB port if you do want to plug in or charge your phone that way. And the center support is decently comfortable for my arm. Speaking of comfort, we do have the seats. Like I said, they are power, memory, heated, ventilated, and I have been pleasantly enjoying them. I tend to enjoy most Mazda seats. I think they're decent in their own right. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do some back seat reviews. All right, so on the back of the 2023 Mazda CX-50 Premium Plus Turbo, or Turbo Premium Plus, whatever it may be. The back seats are really, really nice. I do have a decent amount of room, not as much as I would have thought, but definitely an ample amount. And the seat is moved back in my driving position. I can always move it up. I do have heated seats back here, which is a very, very premium option. And I have 2 USB chargers, although they are traditional USBs. I do also have this center console I can put down, 2 cup holders, and the overall look of the seats is very nice. It has that terracotta stitching that we saw up front, carries on back here. A lot of manufacturers will do stitching up front, but not in the back. Not Mazda, they do it in both. And I do get to enjoy this awesome moonroof from Mazda. This is one of the first times that they've actually done not only a sunroof, but have it continue for the rear occupants. Now this part doesn't actually open, but it's just nice to get that extra light. Speaking of light and space, let's go hop around back. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, so on the back of the CX-50, we do have a trunk release. Press and hold, and the trunk automatically goes up. Once we are back here, something I've really loved in my week is this pocket over here and this pocket over here. Really, really nice for storing stuff that rolls around. Mainly the big friggin' bottle actually rode back here for probably about 4 or 5 days. And it didn't make a sound because it was just contained to the little area. And it also gets these handles, which are also seen on the CX-5, to lower the second row at the flip of a switch. Now, to pull it back up, you do have to go in through the side, pull it back up. But really nice that it has these handles. Overall, plenty of space in the back of the CX-50, and I love it. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I really, first of all, like the look and the styling of the CX-50. I like the more exaggerated fender flares. I like the aggressive front end. I like sort of sawed-off rear end, and it has definitely a little bit different of a look than the CX-5. However, there are a couple more things with the exterior I want to talk about, like the paint color. This is finished in machine gray, and I have to say, it's probably the most boring Mazda color that they offer. And I say that as someone who purchased a vehicle in machine gray. The car that I own and daily drive is a machine gray Mazda. Same exact paint code. The reason I say it's probably the most boring is because Mazda offers some other really cool colors. There's a sandstone and of course Soul Red Metallic, not to mention the cement gray that you can find on their vehicles as well. I think they've been offering some really fantastic paint colors that machine gray has just naturally fallen to the bottom of that list. So if anything, it's a compliment to the rest of Mazda's lineup, not really a nitpick of machine gray specifically. Speaking of exterior, let's talk about size, because size matters here in the CX-50. I was always under the impression that this was a much larger CX-5. However, that's not exactly the case. Although the wheelbase and the overall length is longer, and it has a little bit more ground clearance, you're seeing those numbers on the screen now, it's actually not wider than the CX-5. The CX-5 is actually wider, as you're seeing here, my parents' Mazda CX-5 parked next to this 23 CX-50. And so you can see that it's actually not that much bigger. I always had this idea in my head that it was bigger, but in reality, it's not. Pretty much the same as the CX-5. Now, driving it, you do feel like it is bigger, but it's not. It's almost an optical illusion. Here it is next to my own Mazda 3. Obviously, it is larger than that, and you get quite the ground clearance advantage in the CX-50 over the Mazda 3, but I had this vehicle at my disposal since it's my car, so I figured I'd show you. However, what I wasn't expecting is that the Mazda CX-50 is actually way larger than a 5-year-old Portuguese water dog. Who would have thought? That's the journalism you get here on the Shooting Cars YouTube channel. Last thing I want to talk about with the exterior are actually the turn signals, which I never ever bring up in reviews because pretty much every turn signal is exactly the same. However, that's not the case here in the CX-50, and actually the CX-30 does this as well, but it actually illuminates and then fades away. Illuminates, then fades away. It has this really, really nice fade effect to it. And I think that this is huge because it's very calming when the turn signal is on. In other cars, when the turn signal is flashing, it's bah, 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 bah. But here it's like bah, bah, bah. I love that. I love how unaggressive it is. And it actually makes a really, really big difference in my mood. And I didn't think turn signals would do that. Let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think, having driven the 2023 Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus for the last week? Well, I have to say my experience has been great. Now, if it wasn't obvious by this point in the video, I'm a big Mazda fan. I've owned 5 different Mazdas, and I currently have a Mazda 3 that I've put 81,000 miles on myself. I love that car. I've traveled to 48 of the states in that car. I'm just trying to figure out how to do Alaska and Hawaii. And so I have many, many fond memories in that car. But the interesting thing about the human brain is that your memories never capture the full picture. You see, our brains take in about 11 million bits of information per second, but we only really have the computing power in our heads to handle 50 bits of information. So the brain has to compartmentalize and chunk different memories into sort of the same little filing cabinets. That's why when you try to think of your childhood home, it's hard to remember every wall and every corner, but you remember specifics. When I think of my childhood home, I think of the water stain I made on the table for not using a coaster like my mom said I should. I think of the sound of these metal stars hitting the wall anytime the garage door is opened or closed. I think of the little chime from when you switch the refrigerator from ice to water and back again. I remember little bits and pieces. And so for the CX-50, I start to recognize bits and pieces from my Mazda 3. The gauge cluster is nearly identical. The transmission feels the same. The infotainment is almost at the same angle and height. However, this makes more power. This is larger, it's comfier, it has heated seats. And so much like a dream, I start to mix it with my own memories. I start to remember this car as my Mazda 3, as my Mazda 3 experience. But my car doesn't have heated seats. My car's a lot lower to the ground. My car's a lot slower with the naturally aspirated engine. But that's why I've loved this car so much. It's everything I want my car to be. The CX-50 is the Mazda 3's superhero. This is what my car wants to be when it grows up. And quite frankly, this is what I want to own when I grow up, if that ever happens. The CX-50 does a lot of things right. It checks all the boxes. And I want it to be clear that I don't love this car because I own a Mazda 3. I own a Mazda 3 because I love the products. If I felt like the Subaru Impreza was a better car, I would have purchased it. If I felt like the Honda Civic was a better car, I would have purchased it. So there it is. The only reason I'm giving this car back to Mazda is because I'm contractually obligated to. If I always got what I wanted, it would stay in my driveway. Huge thank you to Mazda of North America for loaning me this car for the last week, as well as everyone over at the Midwestern Automotive Media Association and of course Drive Shop for making this review happen. They are all awesome and I can't thank them enough. Oh, also please go check out my friend Patrick's review of this exact Mazda CX-50 because this is a press car. Press cars are kind of like the sisterhood of the traveling pants. They get driven by a bunch of different media outlets, and my good friend Patrick actually did a complete review of this car as well over at Glass Fuses. I will link that in the description below. Please go check that out if you want to see more about this car. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.